Welcome to episode 4 of my Knitting 101 series. In this episode, we're going to work on a basic rib stitch pattern. This is a stitch pattern created by switching back and forth between knit stitches and purl stitches. So we're not actually learning anything new this week. Instead, we're taking what we've already learned in the past few weeks and combining it in a new way. And our project this week is going to be this scarf. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, wow, that seems like a lot to knit in 1 week, no worries. We're actually going to be spending the next 2 weeks on this project. In this episode, I'm just going to go over the basic rib stitch and the pattern for the scarf. And because this could take more than one skein, I'm going to show you how to join a new skein of yarn when you run out of the first. Next week's video is going to be about fixing some common problems like drop stitches, when they accidentally fall off the end of your needle, and oh, I just realized I knit when I should have purled all the way back in the last row. So both of these should be shorter episodes, which will give you loads of extra time to knit. So quick overview of the scarf. This is about 6 inches wide and 5 feet long. You'll need to cast on 40 stitches. Then every row you'll knit 2 and then purl 2 and repeat across the whole row. And you just do that until it's about 60 inches long. Then you'll bind off in pattern and we'll go over that. All right, let's jump into the knitting. A rib stitch is just switching back and forth between knit and purl stitches. You could knit 1, purl 1, switching every stitch, or knit 2, purl 1, and repeat that pattern every 3 stitches. There's lots of different options. We're going to be doing a knit 2, purl 2 pattern. I use a 2x2 rib for the cuffs on most of my mittens and socks and hats, so I thought it was a good starting point. So I have 40 stitches here, and to start, I am going to slip that first stitch purlwise, and then I'm going to knit 1. Now, again, we're going to be knitting 2 stitches, purling 2 stitches. So even though we slipped this first one, it actually counts as a knit stitch. So my next 2 stitches are going to be purl stitches. So if I'm knitting English style, I'm going to pull the yarn forward, and then I'm going to knit those next 2 stitches. When I go back to knit stitches, I need to move the yarn back. And then again, moving forward to purl the next 2. Now, if I forget to move that yarn forward before I purl, I'm bringing my yarn over the needle. And what I'm actually doing is creating something called a yarn over. And you can kind of see here, this is my last stitch. This is the stitch I am intentionally creating. And I've got a bar in the middle here. So this is actually going to accidentally create an additional stitch. So it's actually going to cause 2 problems. You're going to have an additional stitch, and you're also going to have a gap in your work there. So you want to make sure you're really careful about moving that yarn forward and back again. All right, and then my last 2 stitches on this row were purl stitches. So when I flip this around again, I'm going to slip this stitch as though I'm doing stockinette, because essentially I am. I'm going to start with 2 knit stitches. So each column that I make as I do the rib, it's actually going to be in stockinette. They're just facing opposite directions. So I'm going to slip this, and I'm going to do it Norwegian style this time. So I'm going to knit 1 and then go around behind the yarn to knit 2, or to purl 2 rather. Knit 2. Purl 2. And this is really one of the things that I really love about Norwegian knitting is it's so seamless. Like, I don't have to worry about moving the yarn back and forth. I just move the needle in front of or behind the yarn, and that's how I make sure I don't create those accidental yarn overs, and it just makes it so much faster. Also, you can kind of see now that the first 2 rows when you're doing this are a little bit more difficult just because you don't have that established pattern that you can look back on. But you can kind of see now, I have the V's here and then I have the bars here. So I have knit stitches and purl stitches. So as you're going along, if you're not sure which one you should be doing, you want to look back at your previous rows. If you have the V's underneath there, you want to knit those stitches. If you have the bars, you want to purl those stitches. So if because I was talking and I can't remember what I just did, I can look at this and say, okay, so I have 2 knit stitches here. I have 2 purl stitches here. And I can, again, this is the first row, so it's a little more difficult, but those are 2 knit stitches. So okay, now that I have some length here, you can see it's much easier to see which stitch I was doing before and which one I should do now, unless you stop paying attention because you're much more concerned about the antics that Baby Yoda is getting up to. We'll just pretend that didn't happen, but but anyways, so you are probably going to use a full skein of yarn in this. At some point you're going to run out and you'll need to add in a new skein. So of course there are a million different ways of doing this, but I'm going to show you probably just the easiest one. And for a project like this, it doesn't matter too much. Like, this is a pretty squishy, forgiving project. You're probably not really going to see it regardless, but all we're going to do is just knit a few stitches with both the new skein and the old skein. I normally do 3 stitches because I'm doing a knit 2 purl 2 rib stitch. It feels weird just to do 3, so I'm going to do 4, but 3 is normally sufficient to secure the yarn. So all I'm going to do here is, regardless of how you hold your yarn, if it, this hand or that, I'm going to take the new skein of yarn and I'm going to lay that across. So I have the new skein end is going to be kind of like along this right needle, and then the tail of that is going to be along what's going to be now your working yarn. And I am just going to knit 2 stitches and purl 2 stitches. Okay, and then you can just drop that yarn and then just keep knitting along. You can, if you want to, hold on to this and just kind of keep knitting, and then you don't have to go back in and weave the ends in at the end. I kind of prefer, for something like this, I prefer to actually just go ahead and drop that, and I'll weave them actually like down the columns here. I think it's a little bit less noticeable than if I have like a bunch of stitches in a row that are thicker than normal for some reason. All right, and when you get to the end, you are going to bind off in pattern. All that means is you're going to continue doing your knit 2 purl 2 across as you bind off. So you're going to start exactly the same way. You're going to slip 1, knit 1, and then you are going to bring that slip stitch over. Then you're going to purl 1, oops, and bring that over. Purl another, and bring that over, and you're going to keep going like that across, just doing the same basic bind off. One thing just to watch out for though, because this is supposed to be kind of a stretchy thing, you want to make sure you're not accidentally pulling your bind off stitches too tight. It's kind of easy to do, unfortunately. So you just want to make sure as you're going along that you're keeping it, pretty loose, and testing, if after you do a couple inches, maybe kind of pulling them and making sure they're kind of stretching similarly to your the rest of your scarf. All right, everybody, so that's a pretty short one today. I hope you find it helpful to put the things we've learned together in a different way, and that you love your new scarf. I'm excited for next week where we can go over some of those common issues and problems. But for now, as always, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. And definitely to comment if you have any questions, any thoughts, suggestions, any of that stuff. Definitely, please feel free to let me know. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you next week.